There's a moment that millions of people over 60 know all too well. You go to bed exhausted. You fall asleep without any trouble. And then, without any alarm, without any noise, your eyes open. You look at the clock. 3:07 a.m., you close your eyes and wait. But sleep doesn't come back. Your mind is already moving. Your body feels oddly alert. And the night stretches out in front of you like something you have to survive rather than rest through. If that sounds familiar, I want you to know something right away: you are not alone, and this is not just getting older. Waking up at the same time every night, especially between 2 and 4 a.m., is one of the most common sleep complaints among adults over 60. But here's what most people don't realize. That 3 a.m. wake-up isn't random. It isn't meaningless. Your body is actually doing something very specific in those early morning hours, and understanding what that is can change everything about how you sleep. This isn't about miracle supplements or expensive gadgets. This is about understanding what's actually happening inside your body, so you can work with it instead of fighting it every single night. Let's start with what most people get completely wrong about this. When people over 60 start waking up regularly at 3 a.m., the first thing they usually tell themselves is that it's just part of aging. That sleep gets worse as you get older, and there's not much you can do about it. Maybe they try melatonin. Maybe they take a sleep aid for a few nights. Maybe they just white-knuckle their way through the exhaustion the next day and hope tomorrow night is better. But here's the problem with that thinking. It treats nighttime waking as a mystery, something random that happens to older bodies. And when you believe it's random, you stop looking for the real cause. That's where people stay stuck for years. Because the truth is, consistent middle-of-the-night waking, especially at a predictable hour, almost always has a reason. Sometimes more than one. And when you understand those reasons, you actually have real options. The second mistake people make, and this one is important, so hold on to it, is what they do when they wake up. Most people lie in bed, stiff and frustrated, eyes closed tight, willing themselves back to sleep. The harder they try, the more awake they feel. And the more nights this happens, the more their brain starts to connect the bedroom with frustration and wakefulness rather than rest. That mental association becomes its own problem, layered on top of whatever originally woke them up. We'll come back to this, because the fix here is simpler than most people expect. But first, let's talk about what's actually happening in your body at 3 a.m. One of the most underappreciated causes of middle-of-the-night waking, especially in people over 60, is a drop in blood sugar during sleep. Here's how it works. When you eat dinner, your blood sugar rises. Your pancreas releases insulin to bring it back down. Throughout the night, your body continues managing that balance. But if blood sugar drops too low during the early morning hours, a phenomenon sometimes called nocturnal hypoglycemia, your body interprets that as a mild emergency. It responds by releasing stress hormones, primarily cortisol and adrenaline, to signal the liver to release stored glucose and bring blood sugar back up. Now, that stress hormone release is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's protecting you. But the side effect is that it can pull you right out of sleep, often somewhere between 2 and 4 a.m., which is when blood sugar tends to reach its lowest point of the night. What makes this more common after 60? A few things. Insulin sensitivity changes as we age, meaning the body's glucose regulation becomes less precise. If you've eaten a high-carbohydrate dinner, especially one heavy in refined carbs or sugar, blood sugar rises sharply and then drops more steeply during the night. Alcohol, which many people use to help them relax before bed, has a similar effect. It initially raises blood sugar, then causes a drop in the middle of the night that can trigger that same cortisol response. Researchers studying sleep disruption in older adults have consistently found that metabolic changes, including shifts in how the body handles glucose overnight, are a significant and frequently overlooked driver of nighttime waking. And the practical application here is straightforward. A small protein-based snack before bed, something like a handful of walnuts, a small portion of cheese, or a tablespoon of almond butter, can help stabilize blood sugar through the night and reduce that early morning cortisol spike. Not a large meal. Not sugar. Just a modest amount of protein and healthy fat to give your body something to work with. Now here's where this gets genuinely interesting, because even if your blood sugar is perfectly stable, there's another biological reason your body tends to wake up right around 3 a.m. And this one is built into your physiology whether you like it or not. Cortisol, the hormone most people associate with stress, actually follows a natural daily rhythm. In healthy adults, cortisol levels are at their lowest around midnight, and then they begin rising in the early morning hours. By the time you wake up naturally, cortisol has already climbed significantly. That's part of what gives you the energy and alertness to start your day. But here's the issue. In many older adults, particularly those dealing with chronic stress, disrupted sleep patterns, or elevated anxiety, this cortisol rise can begin earlier than it should. Instead of starting its climb at 5 or 6 a.m., it starts at 2 or 3 a.m. And when cortisol rises, your body shifts into a more alert, activated state. Your heart rate increases slightly. Your brain activity picks up. Deep sleep becomes impossible. And if you are already in a lighter stage of sleep, which becomes more common after 60, that cortisol rise is enough to wake you fully. This is why some people describe their 3 a.m. waking as feeling oddly alert, like their body thinks it's time to get up even though every rational part of them knows it isn't. It's not imagination. Their cortisol really has started its morning climb too early. The good news is that this dysregulation is often connected to lifestyle factors that can be addressed. Chronic stress, even low-grade background stress, elevates baseline cortisol and disrupts its natural timing. Irregular sleep schedules confuse the body's internal clock and throw off hormonal rhythms. Excessive screen time in the evening, particularly exposure to blue light, interferes with melatonin production and indirectly affects cortisol timing as well. Evening news, stressful conversations, scrolling through social media, all of these keep the nervous system in a mild state of activation at exactly the time it needs to be winding down. Let's talk about sleep architecture for a moment, because this is something that changes significantly after 60, and most people have no idea it's happening. Sleep isn't one continuous state. It moves through cycles, from light sleep into deeper stages, and eventually into REM sleep, the stage associated with dreaming and memory consolidation. In young adults, these cycles include long stretches of deep, slow-wave sleep, particularly in the first half of the night. But as we age, the proportion of deep sleep decreases. The body spends more time in lighter stages, and the transitions between stages become more frequent. What this means practically is that after 60, you're spending more of the night in stages of sleep where you're easier to wake up. A noise that wouldn't have disturbed you at 35 pulls you awake at 65. A slight temperature change. Indigestion. Even the normal biological processes of your body moving through sleep stages can be enough to bring you to consciousness. This isn't a failure of your body, it's a normal shift in sleep architecture. But it does mean that environmental and lifestyle factors that once had little effect on your sleep now matter much more. The bedroom temperature, the consistency of your sleep schedule, what you eat and drink in the hours before bed, these variables carry far more weight than they did decades ago. According to sleep researchers at the National Institute on Aging, older adults are not physiologically capable of producing the same amount of deep sleep as younger people, but the total sleep need doesn't decrease as dramatically as many believe. What changes is the efficiency of sleep and its sensitivity to disruption. Understanding this helps explain why small changes, like keeping a consistent wake time, managing bedroom temperature, and reducing evening stimulation, can produce surprisingly significant improvements. Now there's another cause of 3 a.m. waking that doesn't get nearly enough attention, and it's one that many people feel a little embarrassed to talk about. Anxiety. Not dramatic, obvious anxiety, but the quiet, low-level kind that hums in the background of daily life without ever quite announcing itself. During the day, you're busy. There are things to do, people to talk to, tasks that occupy your attention. The mental noise stays manageable. But at 3 a.m., when there's nothing to distract you, that mental noise becomes the only sound in the room. Worries that seem small during the day feel enormous at 3 a.m. Health concerns. Financial worries. Fears about the future. Memories that surface unexpectedly. Regrets that visit when there's nothing to crowd them out. This isn't weakness. This is the brain doing what brains do, processing, sorting, and rehearsing, without the daytime buffer of activity and distraction. What's happening neurologically is that the prefrontal cortex, the rational, calming part of your brain, is less active during sleep and in those groggy middle-of-the-night moments. The amygdala, which processes fear and threat, remains active. So even mild worries can feel disproportionately heavy and urgent at 3 a.m. in a way they genuinely don't during waking hours. This is worth knowing, because it changes how you respond. If you wake up at 3 a.m. and your thoughts start spiraling, it's not a sign that your worries are actually that serious. It's a sign that your brain chemistry at that hour amplifies concern. Knowing that doesn't make the thoughts disappear, but it does give you a framework to observe them with a little more distance. Most people stop here, but what comes next is the part that actually changes things. Knowing the causes is useful. But what you do in the moment, when you're awake at 3 a.m. and sleep isn't coming, matters just as much. The instinct is to stay in bed. To lie still, keep your eyes closed, and try to force yourself back to sleep. This feels logical. But here's what's actually happening when you do that. Your brain is associating your bed with wakefulness, frustration, and effort. Sleep researchers call this conditioned arousal, and it's one of the most powerful drivers of chronic insomnia. Every night you spend lying awake in bed, tense and frustrated, reinforces the connection between your bed and that activated, alert state. Over time, getting into bed can actually start to trigger wakefulness rather than sleep. The counterintuitive solution, backed by decades of sleep research and used in cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, is to get out of bed if you've been awake for more than 15 to 20 minutes and sleep isn't coming. This doesn't mean turning on bright lights, checking your phone, or doing something stimulating. It means getting up quietly, moving to another room, and sitting in low, warm light doing something calm. Reading a physical book. Listening to quiet music or a gentle podcast. Sitting with a cup of herbal tea. The goal is to let your body's sleep drive build again naturally, and to break that mental association between your bed and wakefulness. When you feel genuinely sleepy, you go back to bed. People resist this because it sounds like giving up on sleep. It isn't. It's actually training your nervous system to associate bed with sleep rather than struggle, and that training pays off over weeks and months in deeper, more consolidated sleep. Let's get specific about what a practical strategy actually looks like, because general advice is easy to forget, but a real plan is something you can use. Start with what you eat in the hours before bed. The goal is to avoid blood sugar swings during the night. That means keeping dinner balanced, with protein, healthy fats, and fiber rather than a heavy load of refined carbohydrates or sugar. Alcohol deserves special mention here. Even 1 or 2 drinks in the evening can disrupt sleep architecture significantly in people over 60, promoting deeper sleep in the early night but causing fragmented, restless sleep in the second half. If you're waking at 3 a.m. consistently, alcohol in the evening is worth reconsidering. A small protein snack before bed, if you feel like you might benefit from it, can help. Something modest. Walnuts, a small amount of cottage cheese, or a slice of turkey. Enough to give your blood sugar a stable floor through the night without taxing your digestion. Your sleep environment matters more than most people realize, particularly after 60. The ideal bedroom temperature for sleep is cooler than most people keep their rooms, somewhere in the range of 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Your core body temperature naturally drops as you move into deep sleep, and a cool room supports that process. Darkness matters too. Even small amounts of light, from streetlights, devices, or a television left on, can disrupt melatonin production and sleep continuity. Consistency in your sleep schedule is one of the most powerful tools available, and it costs nothing. Going to bed and waking up at the same time every day, including weekends, anchors your body's circadian rhythm. It reinforces the timing of cortisol, melatonin, and all the other hormones that regulate your sleep-wake cycle. Many people focus on bedtime and ignore wake time. The research suggests wake time is actually more important. Getting up at the same time every morning, even after a poor night, helps recalibrate your sleep system faster than anything else. Wind-down routines matter more than most people acknowledge. The nervous system doesn't switch from alert to relaxed instantly. It needs time to transition. A consistent pre-sleep routine, even 20 or 30 minutes of calm, low-stimulation activity, signals to your brain that sleep is approaching. That might be light stretching, reading, gentle music, or simply sitting quietly. What it shouldn't include is news, social media, stressful conversations, or anything that activates your threat detection system right before you're trying to rest. If you're over 60 and you've been waking at 3 a.m. for weeks or months, I want you to have realistic expectations, because unrealistic ones lead to frustration, and frustration makes sleep worse. You are unlikely to fix years of disrupted sleep in 3 days. What typically happens when people implement these changes thoughtfully is a gradual improvement over 2 to 4 weeks. Some nights will still be difficult. But the pattern shifts. The waking becomes less frequent. When it does happen, falling back asleep gets easier. The anxiety around sleep, which is often its own problem by this point, starts to loosen. The things that work are not dramatic. They're consistent. A stable wake time. A quieter evening. A bedroom that's cool and dark. A small adjustment to what you eat before bed. Getting out of bed when sleep won't come, instead of lying there fighting it. None of these are magic. All of them are real. And if you've made these changes and nothing improves after several weeks, if you're still waking consistently, still exhausted during the day, still struggling to function, that's a conversation worth having with your doctor. There are underlying conditions, including sleep apnea, thyroid issues, and certain medication effects, that can drive nighttime waking and that deserve proper evaluation. This video is educational content, not medical advice, and a real sleep problem that doesn't respond to lifestyle changes deserves a real clinical assessment. Here's what I want you to take away from all of this. Waking up at 3 a.m. after 60 is common, but it isn't inevitable, and it isn't something you simply have to accept. Your body is doing something predictable, something with identifiable causes, and something that responds to thoughtful, patient intervention. You understand now that blood sugar fluctuations in the night can trigger a cortisol response that pulls you out of sleep. You understand that cortisol's natural morning rise can happen too early in people under stress or with disrupted sleep schedules. You understand that sleep architecture changes with age, making you more sensitive to disruption, which is why environment and consistency matter so much more than they once did. You understand that anxiety, even the quiet kind, finds its loudest voice at 3 a.m. And you understand that the way you respond when you wake up, whether you fight it or work with it, can either break the cycle or deepen it. That's real knowledge. That's something you can actually use. If this gave you a clearer picture of what's happening in your body at night, and maybe a few things worth trying, then this is exactly what this channel is here for. Real information about what happens to the body after 60, translated into things you can actually understand and use. No sensationalism. No miracle claims. Just honest, evidence-based content that respects your intelligence and your time. If that's what you're looking for, subscribe, because there's a lot more where this came from. And if you're one of the millions of people who know exactly what 3 a.m. feels like, drop a comment below. You're not alone in this, and sometimes, just knowing that makes the night a little easier to get through.